Welcome back to AFGE's Inside Government, available on demand at InsideGovernmentRadio.com. We've been joined by Bob Weiner, a former Clinton White House spokesman. Bob, welcome back to our program.
It's a pleasure, Jason, and thanks so much for having me. I'm here at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium, where 7,500 researchers are feeling very threatened, both by recent budget cuts and now by sequestration. So to them, the fiscal cliff is very real.
Yeah, Bob, that's interesting. I'm wondering what the attendees down there are saying about all this activity in Washington.
Well, Jason, they're saying that cancer mortality has decreased 22.9% for men and 15.1% for women, about 20% in the last 2 decades and about 30% in the last 3 decades. And that's because of the research that would be cut some 8% additionally and has been cut in real terms about 20% over the last decade in terms of inflation. How stupid are we to cut off our noses to spite our face in terms of the number 2 killer that faces all of us in the country? As you know, my wife is a breast cancer researcher. She has discovered a gene activated, Dr. Patricia Berg, she has discovered a gene activated in 80% of women with breast cancer, 70% of men with prostate cancer, is working on a suppressor and a blood test. And now, instead of 25% of people that apply for grants from NIH that get them, John Retzlaff, the head of research for the group here, the American Association of Cancer Research, says that only 12% of people get grants, and many people think it's way less than that. So there's a threat to the country because of the penny-wise, pound-foolish tax breaks for the rich and the 2 wars that are ongoing. President Obama has stated that it's a priority to do biomedical research. But the Tea Party in Congress threatens all of us.
Bob, what would happen to cancer research if no deal is struck? What happens January 1st?
There'd be immediately an 8% further cut in cancer research. And that's inane to my way of thinking. It is absolutely a stupid thing for the country to do. Now, I think what's going to happen, Jason, I'm more optimistic than some. I think that the Republicans have been forced to come in with a proposal, finally, and they did. But the proposal is Social Security cuts and Medicare cuts along the lines of Simpson-Bowles, but cuts nonetheless without tax breaks and new revenues. So they're putting the entire thing on the backs of seniors and the poor and the middle class. That isn't going to fly. But I think that what will happen is President Obama has put forth what's unacceptable to the Republicans, which is cutting tax breaks for the rich. For some reason, even though 60% of Americans support it, it's a 2-to-1. It's about 60 to 35 or something that support the tax breaks for the rich, support cutting them back. But nonetheless, the Republicans are adamant about that. I think, from my 6.5 years in the White House and 16 years on Capitol Hill with Congressman Conyers, Rangel, Pepper, and Koch, I think they'll split the difference on this one. I don't think that either side, Jason, will allow itself to be the Christmas Grinch and to have people have to pay $2,000 more taxes as we go into into Christmas. I think the week before Christmas, sometime between the 15th and 22nd, they will strike a deal. And what I think will happen is Pelosi and Schumer both have stated that they would be agreeable to, instead of $250,000, either $500,000 or $1 million. And Boehner, I believe, will accept because he will unfortunately get the principle accepted of some cuts to these incredibly valuable programs, Social Security and Medicare. I think the Democrats will have to eat a little something and take slight cuts to those programs, and then they will kick the ball further down the road. But they will also agree to, I think, the principle that the debt ceiling should never be threatening the credit rating of the United States again. So I think it's going to be one of these. Nobody is happy, and Democrats and liberals will be especially unhappy. But I think that a deal will be struck along those lines.
Bob, with all of your experience on Capitol Hill and in the White House, tell the audience a little bit how you think a deal might get done. Will there be a lot of behind-the-scenes work that we might not know about? How's this process going to play out?
Well, we have precedent. I was with Congressman Claude Pepper. I was Chief of Staff of the House Aging Committee under the great incredibly iconic, fantastic hero of my life, Claude Pepper, who, as you remember, we fought and succeeded to abolish mandatory retirement, and we protected seniors from abuses in nursing homes and expanded home health care so that Part B would cover it more under Medicare, and we did all kinds of things. But one of the other things that happened was they struck the deal in 1983 to protect Social Security forever and ever, and it succeeded. And actually, the bottom line is, given the money that seniors pay in, it is protected until 2035 or something like that. And then even then, it's only got a 25% shortfall if the economy doesn't improve, which it will. I mean, we're going to get more jobs. We're coming back now. So, but what happened is the government spent the money. They didn't put a hard, what Gore called a lockbox. They jokingly on Saturday Night Live, they made fun of it. It didn't happen as a lockbox, so the government has the right to use the money, but the law also says that the trust fund is owed to seniors. So you have two conflicting things going on. That will happen again, I think, Jason. I think what happened is the seniors, in fact, are owed the money by the United States, but we've spent the money. But I want to know, if you went to a bank and the bank said, we spent the money you invested on other things, if you would let the bank say, okay, then you don't have to pay me back. And the reality is the good faith and credit of the United States still owes the seniors the money they paid in as premiums. But having said that, the media has succeeded in creating this myth that there is a shortfall in Social Security because the government spent the money on other purposes, even though if you add it up and you go to the Social Security website, it shows how there have already been 11 years since 1963 that they've spent negative years, and they've made up the difference in the trust fund. So the money is there in technical and legal terms, but the Republicans have succeeded in the myth of saying there's a Social Security shortfall. So given that, there will be a deal. The deal now will be to accept some of that myth, I think, and to cause either an increase in the COLAs, which is what Boehner has now proposed, or expanding the age again, so it's not just 65 to 67, but it's 68 or 70, which is a horrible thing for half of Americans who have real hard jobs and would be forced into working more years as painters, carpenters, road makers, and bricklayers, and so forth. Half of Americans have physical labor, real hard jobs, not just desk jobs, that which are hard enough. I had one of them, So, but that will happen, and there have to be a compromise where they expand the ages, or they expand the COLAs, and Medicare likewise expanding the age was one of from 65 to 67 in terms of your eligibility for a lot of the benefits is one of the proposals of Boehner, and so that may be the deal that's in the making, plus some expansion of some give on the rich tax breaks. Obama has already caved enormously because he didn't want to accept any of the Bush tax cuts because of the needed revenue. He wanted none of them. But in the last two budget deals, he accepted them. Now what he's done is he's got a quarter of the value, the $1 trillion that the rich tax breaks are worth, and that's what's on the table now. And maybe there'll be a cave, and half of that will be accepted by the president so it'll be a $500 trillion value to the Treasury instead of the full trillion. That, I think, will be where the deal comes. But, Jason, I absolutely cannot see, and I don't think it will happen because there's a different mood. The Republicans recognize that President Obama actually won the election. There will not be where they allow themselves to get blamed for just fighting for tax breaks for the rich, which the polls are so clear, 2-1, that the American people don't want, that I can't see them allowing that to go through Christmas. So I think there'll be a deal by Christmas. They'll be in the back rooms. They'll hammer it out. It'll be half on the tax breaks and half on the entitlement cuts. The thing that will be off the table that I think is tragic is what Jim Clyburn, the number 2 Democratic leader in the House, called war funding. He said if you included war funding, then you would have 300 to 400 votes for a deal. But they will not do it. What Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex is incredibly dominant, and the Lockheeds, the Boeings, and unbelievably the Halliburtons, who've been debarred, but through different names they still have contracts, they have so much political power through campaign contributions that they will continue to be revenue neutral in terms of the federal government not changing a dime, even though they give nothing back in terms of dollars. They only do what President Obama said is cost us the total of what the next 10 countries combined pay for military spending, and we're stuck with that because of the political power of the contractors. That I don't think is going to change no matter what we try to do about it.
Bob, as we close out here, I just want to get your sense for the Republican counteroffer. Of course, this week there's been a little back and forth between the two sides working towards a deal, of course. But were you surprised by the Republican counteroffer this week, or was it about what you expected?
It was more moderate than I expected. I didn't think they would only go to Simpson-Bowles. I thought they would ask for more cuts. So that's what puts it as a reasonable proposal that unfortunately is one where you can now split the difference between what they've asked for and the tax break restorations that President Obama has asked for, and it now makes it mathematically possible to make a deal. It's the old style of split the difference, and you have a deal in Congress. So I was surprised that, and many people were surprised that they only went to the Simpson-Bowles formula. It makes Boehner look more reasonable, although I think what he's doing is horrible and inexcusable. There is no Social Security deficit. Medicare is now 10 years more solvent because of the president's health care bill, and they are exploiting those and establishing the principle that you can cut entitlements. Unfortunately, I don't think we can do anything about the fact that we're going to have to give a little bit on that for no good reason, because we're not touching war funding and there's no reason for all these tax breaks. But I think that's what's going to happen.
Bob Weiner, the former Clinton White House spokesman. Bob, always fun having you on the program. Thanks for shedding some additional light on this issue.
Thanks, Jason, so much for having me.